50.
Virtua Cop was a '94 arcade classic designed by the legendary Yu Suzuki. Ultimately ported to the Sega Saturn in '95, it's the arcade experience I love. A rails-based shooter, all you had to do was worry about blowing away your polygonal targets dressed in black suits or muscle shirts while avoiding innocent morons who would pop out from their perfectly good hiding spaces and wait before they yelled, "Help me!" This game was so much fun and paved the way for other like-on shooters. Sure, it had the same polygonal flaws of other mid-90s games with crazy character models, but who cares? The game was awesome, and more importantly, you looked awesome playing it, holding your light gun in one hand, head cocked at an angle, wasting the bad guys.
Sonic Adventure. That blue streak brought his new attitude to a new Sega console in North America on 9/9/99, the Sega Dreamcast. It wasn't the first time we saw Sonic in 3D, and unfortunately it wouldn't be the last, but this game did it right. Everything was right with this game for its time. Controls, the speed and pace, fun characters both new and old, even the world itself had a lot going on for it. Also, the Dreamcast's VMU, or Visual Memory Unit, got in on the action with a minigame based on the KOs you find within the main game. And admit it, you thought Amy was cute too. The visuals and story had us all very hopeful for Sonic in the new century, and regardless on thoughts about the later games, this showed that 3D Sonic was possible and very much a good time. It's one of Sega's finest and a must-have for anyone with a Dreamcast.
Sega Rally Championship. Growing up around a seaside town, I was never allowed on this machine whenever I visited the arcade. It wasn't until late '97 when a kid within the same village that I used to live in was given a Sega Saturn for Christmas, and this was the game he had included with it. I was around that house more hours in the day than I spent in my own, settling down and always choosing the Delta over the Celica and gradually learning how the game worked. You can imagine to my chagrin every time I could not get out the first track of 3 as I hadn't placed far enough in the race as my time ran out. I'd input my initials and be greeted with the most charming game over noise that has ever graced my ears within a video game.
Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Castle of Illusion is a single-player, side-scrolling platformer released in 1990 for the Sega Genesis. I'm a sucker for a good Disney game, even though I only really discovered them as an adult. Playing as Mickey Mouse, who has to enter a castle to save Minnie from the evil witch Miserable, seems oddly familiar. Think Plumber, Princess, and King Koopa, but you do have to jump on bosses more than 3 times to defeat them. Similarities to Mario aside, Castle of Illusion really holds its own as a great video game. There is a lot of variety in the levels, which are super fun and challenging, and the graphics are cute and vibrant with music to match. The controls also feel really good in this game. I'm usually pretty terrible at jumping on things, but I don't struggle as much when I'm playing as Mickey. Huh, a Disney game that isn't punishingly difficult. Who would have thunk it?
Road Rash. Growing up in a mainly Nintendo-based household, I was shocked and in awe over playing this title for the first time on the Sega Mega Drive. You see, I was always exposed to fast-paced races in F-Zero or cutesy characters in Super Mario Kart. Never in my life would I imagine crashing into other racers or punching them in the face and getting praised for it. I was never any good at Road Rash, nor did I progress too far within the 5 tracks, but that didn't deter me from listening to one of the greatest soundtracks I've ever heard on the Mega Drive on loop for hours on end.
Number 45.
Columns. Released in 1990 for the arcade, Genesis, and as the first pack-in game for the Sega Game Gear, Columns is the original Match 3 puzzle game. Groupings of 3 vertical gems fall from the top of the screen and can be shuffled to make vertical, horizontal, or diagonal combinations of 3 or more, which clear from the screen. With proper planning and a little bit of luck, this can trigger cascading combinations capable of clearing the screen and racking up the points. Being one of, if not the first Match 3 game, Columns gameplay continues on today with games like Bejeweled and Candy Crush, and Columns is just as playable on the original hardware as it has ever been. Columns. Stack 'em all.
Shinobi. Remember when ninjas were all the craze? In the 1980s, the image of the black-clad, sword-wielding, high-jumping, star-throwing, wall-crawling warrior had snuck its way into movies, comics, and of course, video games. And most prominently, in the darkened corners of the arcades was Shinobi, a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you play as Joe Musashi. That's right, the ninja's name is Joe. Fighting through terrorists as you rescue your students is sword-slashing, dart-flinging fun. And when you're in a pinch, you can deploy a special ninjutsu power that clears the screen of all enemies, but only once per stage. Arguably the most iconic ninja video game franchise, having Joe Musashi's image synonymous with the Sega brand, Shinobi holds its place as an arcade classic, which spawned many sequels and home ports.
Sonic the Hedgehog's Spinball. There's no denying everyone's favorite blue hedgehog was in his prime during the early 90s, and to this day, his self-titled games are still considered some of the best platforming experiences of the 16-bit era. Sonic put Sega on the map, and for a time they could do no wrong. So when news came of the Sonic 3 delay, Sonic Spinball came bouncing in to save the day. Exactly how it sounds, you play as Sonic the Hedgehog, traversing through sewers, steamworks, and power plants, all in the style of pinball. The colorful environments, the fast-paced action, the satisfying boss battles, they all harken back to the franchise's platforming roots, while still offering a completely new and unique experience for players to enjoy. It's these sorts of risks that gave the Genesis so many gaming gems in the early 90s. So whether you're a fan of the blue blur, or just a casual pinballer, pick up the controller, ready your paddles, and get ready to collect some Chaos Emeralds and take down the evil Robotnik.
Altered Beast. Originally a Sega arcade release, Altered Beast was ported to the Genesis in 1989 as one of the original pack-in games for the system. Additionally, a version was released on the Master System. This game is a side-scrolling beat-em-up spanning 5 levels where you play as a centurion brought back from the dead to fight an ancient evil. As you progress, you grab orbs to boost your strength, and eventually alter you into a beast specific to that level, including a wolf, dragon, bear, and tiger. Each of these forms has its own special attacks and will allow you to fight the level's boss. Altered Beast has been released on many modern consoles and compilations, but the arcade remains as the definitive edition, superior to any of the console releases. Overall, this game is short, but certainly worth a playthrough. Altered Beast. Rise from your grave.
Number 41.
Remember that one time John McClane fought a sumo wrestler, spider robots, and saved the president's daughter from terrorists? Well, in case you don't, here's your chance to experience all that and more with Die Hard Arcade. Die Hard Arcade is a beat-em-up game released by Sega for the arcade in 1996 and the Sega Saturn in 1997. In Die Hard Arcade, you can play as either John McClane or his partner Chris Thompson as you make your way through this giant building, taking out waves of different, and I mean different, enemies until you finally reach the leader of this terrorist group known as White Fang. I remember playing this game back in the arcade back in the day, and when I finally got my Sega Saturn, this was the first game I acquired for that console. This game is dumb fun at its finest, and it'll have you saying yippee-ki-yay,
Mr. Falcon, in no time.